Bonjour à tous et bienvenue à Bruxelles.
Hello everybody and welcome to Brussels. I am Mélissa and I will be your guide for the following hours through the streets of Brussels. I'm a travel blogger essentially. I've been a travel blogger for 10 years at mellovestravels.com, but also I'm a part of a collective called BXL blog, and it's the first city blog about Brussels in French. So welcome to the capital of Belgium and of Europe. During the tour, I will see your questions. Don't worry about it, but there will be a slight delay. So don't worry if I don't answer your questions right away. It's just a delay during the live. So the tour will be in English, but let me introduce myself to our French speaking viewers for a couple of minutes and then we will get the tour started. Bonjour à tous, je suis Mélissa et je serai votre guide pendant l'heure qui suit à travers les rues de Bruxelles. C'est un plaisir pour moi de vous accueillir ici. Et la visite se fera en anglais, mais je voulais un peu me présenter brièvement. Donc je suis Mélissa, blogueuse voyage sur mélangera.com et aussi membre du collectif bruxellesblog.be qui est le premier city blog bruxellois en français. Et c'est un grand honneur pour moi de vous faire visiter Bruxelles avec Blogueuse. Alors la visite se fera en anglais, vous pouvez poser les questions en français. Bonjour René. Il y aura un petit délai certainement entre les questions et les réponses, mais il n'y a pas de souci, on répondra. Donc voilà, je vais switcher la caméra mais aussi parler en anglais. Allez, c'est parti. And we are right in the heart of Brussels with the magnificent Grand Place. And of course, you can see all the guild houses around. The Grand Place is the heart of Brussels. It's been called the most beautiful square in Europe. Jean Cocteau, the famous French director, said it was the most beautiful theater in the world. So I quite agree with him. As you can see, it's absolutely stunning. Most especially this, the City Hall. The City Hall is the oldest part that's still surviving on the Grand Place, because what you see around the beautiful guild houses, actually they're not that old. In 1695, the King of France, Louis XIV, sent his army to Brussels and basically bombarded the city for 3 days. Hello everybody, I'm just saying hello in the middle. You're very numerous, I like that. So 1695, the Grand Place is bombarded, and in 3 years only, the guilds, because at the time the houses were built by different guilds of craftsmen, they rebuilt essentially almost the whole Grand Place. And the only thing that was left standing after the bombardment was the City Hall with its magnificent spire. And there is a legend about the City Hall. I will take a few steps back. Ah yes, Laetitia. I know the feeling. Everybody, in fact, people think that it's a boring city, but most of the time people love Brussels when they get to know it. So as you can see, the entrance door is not completely in the middle of the building. It's been said that when the architect saw the building finished, he was so ashamed that he climbed all the way to the top of the spire and threw himself out of there out of shame. So sad story, sad but not true in fact. The architect they were talking about was Van Ruysbroek, but he didn't make the door, he made the spire. So we don't know if the architect that made the door threw himself out of the spire, but Van Ruysbroek, he lived up to the ripe old age of 90 years old. So as you can see, all these houses, so they used to be built for, you know, craftsmen's guild, and there's a few of them that are very, very interesting. For instance, it's called the House of the Dukes of Brabant. It's in fact several houses that were made into the same style. But there is one that is quite interesting. This one. It's called the Windmill. Used to be the house of the millers, the craftsmen who made flour. And Victor Hugo used to live here for 1 month when he came into exile in Brussels because he was opposed to Napoleon III. So he came here, he stayed in this house first, and then he moved and stayed in this house. It's called the House of the Pigeon. It used to be the house of the painters, actually. And he lived there for a total of 7 months before he decided to go to England and then the Anglo-Norman islands. But that's where he started writing Les Misérables. So that's why he was able to describe so well the field of Waterloo during Les Misérables. It's a very vivid depiction of the Battle of Waterloo because he lived in Brussels. Waterloo is closed, so he just took a trip there and to be able to see what it was like to be on the field where Napoleon lost. And we have another interesting house because you have to know that shortly after Belgium got its independence, it received a lot of famous guests who were often exiled from their own country. One of them was Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. And they used to love to come here to the House of the Swan. It was a cafe and they spent quite a lot of time here. And in fact, that is where they started to write the Communist Party manifesto. And actually, they celebrated as well New Year's Eve here. It was a place where those two were, regular customers. And moving on, thank you, Miriam. I hope you will like it. It's just the beginning. Moving on to our famous citizen, Everhard Serklaas. Now, you cannot pass this street without touching Everhard Serklaas' arm and the nose of his dog. Everhard Serklaas was a city councillor who was pretty attached to Jeanne, the Duchess of Brabant, and he got into a territorial conflict with the neighboring earl, the Earl of Gasbeek, and the Earl of Gasbeek was actually really, really jealous of his popularity and arranged a trap when the poor man was beaten to death, almost. He was found alive, but unfortunately, he was close to death. He was brought here to the Grand Place and, and he just died. The horrible thing is that the people who attacked him cut out his tongue. So he could not say anything, but everybody knew that the people who attacked him were paid by the Earl of Gasbeek. And so, as you can see here, the people of Brussels rose up in arms and decided to attack the castle. What's very particular is that when they were going, to war at the time, the people came with their food, and especially chicken. So the people of Brussels are known as kikkervretter, which means chicken eaters. So, and if you want to bring yourself luck, you just touch the arm and the nose of the dog. My journalism school is further down the street, and I can tell you that every time I had an exam, I would rub the arm and nose, and I managed to get my degree, so I guess that works. So usually this neighborhood would be full of people. It's the touristical heart of Brussels, but as you can see, with the people not being able to travel, we have all the space for ourselves. Yeah. Friesland, lots of souvenirs. I bet. So, little anecdote about this hotel. It's called the Amigo. It's a luxury hotel. Lots of stars come here. But the name, it comes from a very different kind of lodging. Actually, the police of Brussels is behind. And there used to be, since I think the 16th century, a jail. And because Brussels had been under Spanish rule for a long time, until almost the 18th century, we used word in Spanish, and it was called, the jail were people who were unruly. It was mostly for for drunkenness and petty thieves. It was called the Amigo. So the name remained. And if you go to the police that's just behind the hotel, you say, I'm going to the Amigo. Here you will find lots of shops, of course, waffles. Delicious. I love it, especially the Liège waffle, this kind of waffle. And now, as you can see over here, we have the rainbow zebra path, because this is the start of what's called the village. It's the gay neighborhood of Brussels. Let me see if I can cross the street. Bonjour. J'en ai pas malheureusement. Bonne journée. Yes, Véro, oui, Véro, il dit on va voir mannequin. So, Brussels is of course the capital of the country of comic book strips. And I bet you recognize these guys. Can you spot them? Of course, it's Tintin. Tintin and Captain Haddock and Snowy. And it's there as a part of the comic book strip path. All around the city you will find different heroes of comic book strips. So you can actually visit Brussels following all the different murals. This one, some of them are original, but this one is not. It's taken from an episode of Tintin. I'll let you take a look at it, and you tell me which episode of Tintin, which book of Tintin it is. All right, if somebody can find it. I'll give you a couple of minutes. Oui, Sophie, c'est une bonne idée aussi de faire une visite de street art. On aura peut-être une chance d'en voir d'ici la fin. Il y en a beaucoup. Yes, so Sophie is telling me street art visit would be nice. We will see a little bit of it. But first, so if you haven't guessed, the album of this mural is the Calculus Affair. And here he is, the most famous citizen of Brussels, mannequin piece. Here he is. As you can see, he's quite tiny. That's the first thing that people notice when they see him. People laugh a lot because they say, oh my god, he's so tiny. And yes, he is small. And of course, he's wearing a mask because we should be all careful. And you know, mannequin piece being the first citizen of Brussels, is showing us what we need to do. And yes, he has his mask. He's wearing his mask, exactly. But mannequin piece is in fact very old. There are records of this fountain with a little peeing boy, you know, since the 14th, 15th century. So it's quite old. It was just part of the fountain system, and then it was just a stone. It was just a stone statue, and then it was turned into a bronze statue. And it became very popular, and pretty soon it was adopted by the people from Brussels and others. And well, the poor little guy, he was stolen many times. And especially one of the most famous one is when the soldiers of King Louis XV of France stole him. And in return, King Louis decided to return him to Brussels, and to appease the anger of the people, he offered mannequin piece a magnificent costume, you know, made of cloth of gold, a sword, and he was also decorated by the Order of St. Louis. And this costume is the very first of his wardrobe. Mannequin piece has a wardrobe of around 800 costumes, even more now, and you can see them at the museum of the city of Brussels, which is on the Grand Place. So if you think, you know, he doesn't have anything, you know, against, well, Kim Kardashian doesn't have anything against him in the fashion department. Like, that's what, 5 centuries of clothing almost. Not bad. But why this little pink boy, you will tell me? Well, there are several legends about it. First of all, mannequin piece just means the little pink boy, but his name is in fact Julien. It's this little Julien, and there's a lot of legends about him. Some of them, the two most important are the ones where there was this little boy who peed on the door of a witch that was living here, and she was so outraged she turned him into stone. But a kind old man saw that, and he was able to lift the curse from the boy and replace it with the identical statue. The other one is that it was a little boy during one of the sieges of Brussels who saw that there was a bomb planted next to the city walls, and to avoid it from blowing up, he didn't have any water, so he used what nature gave him, and he peed on the wick, and so the bomb didn't explode. So, thank you, mannequin piece. Without him, Brussels wouldn't be the same. And we say goodbye to mannequin. Yes, Charlotte, indeed, it's deserted without the tourists. It's quite amazing. So, let's carry on towards the Saint-Jacques neighborhood. It's one of the most picturesque neighborhoods of the downtown Brussels area. Quite old as well. There's a few beautiful houses that remain, but mostly it's also the place where you have many gay bars and shops. Let's see, you're careful crossing the street, and as you can see, mannequin is a little bit into fetish. Oops, being careful. this is where you, in this part of the city, you will find a lot of very nice shops, such as this one. But Brussels is also quite known for its vintage vinyl stores. So Ville and Geeks is one of them, but there's a lot of it. Indeed, Lou, it's really picturesque. Some part of the city, because it's a big architectural mess. Sometimes a lot of things have been destroyed, you know, during the 50s, but we still have some nice remains. Now, if it wasn't for the lockdown, over here you would see like a whole terrace. A beautiful terrace with a whole bunch of people here, and with the church of Our Lady of Bon Secours. It gives it really the impression of being a village. And Our Lady of Bon Secours is actually a very interesting church, because it's supposed to be the start of the Santiago de Compostela path. So you see, you have the marking here, and before this church was built, there was the site of the Church of St. James, which of course is the reason why you have the Santiago de Compostela. So, ok, Charlotte, cette façade, c'est la façade de l'église Notre-Dame de Bon Secours. Très belle façade baroque, le début du chemin de Saint-Jacques de Compostelle. And it's one of my favorite street, actually. At least in the city center. It used to be a main thoroughfare during medieval time, actually, but now not anymore. It's just a small, quaint street. And we are switching here. We take this one. When I told you there were remains, for instance, you have this beautiful painting from the 16th century, and it was discovered in 1993 during some renovation of the house, and they found it. So you still find a lot of treasures. Let's see, we carry on. You can see it's a very medieval looking street up until we get approximately here. In a few paths we will jump 2 centuries forwards, at least, from the 17th to the 19th century. Here we are on Boulevard Anspach. Boulevard Anspach is one of the main avenues that were built during the 19th century. So let me get back let me get back into history. So in 1830, Belgium becomes independent from the Netherlands. And Brussels, which was essentially a provincial town, becomes the capital of a new young country. So it was time to do something about it to, make it look like a real capital. So in the middle of the 19th century, a very famous mayor, Jules Anspach, decides that, following the example of Paris, he wants to tear down the whole medieval town because of different motives. First of all, he thinks it's not pretty. Second of all, it's not safe. Third of all, it's not hygienic. Because, believe it or not, I will let him go. Where I'm walking now, a river used to run through it. Yes, Emily, indeed, lots of street art in Brussels, and hopefully we'll get to see quite a bit of it. So, a river used to run through here. It was called the Seine, and it was used for everything, for transportation. People would dump their waste, house waste, but also, bodily waste. They would throw their chamber pots out of the river, and so you would have a lot of diseases, and especially after one more cholera epidemic, the mayor said, all right, we are burying the river and building a decent, boulevard that will make Brussels look like a city of the 19th century. So they decided to completely tear down streets, houses, everything, all the way from here, all the way back there. You can imagine what kind of work that was. And they built also some different tubes where the river was flowing now. And nowadays the river has been displaced. It's not running down the city center anymore. It's being displaced, and instead of the river, it's the underground tram. They use actually the tunnels that they dug for the tram as tunnel. The tunnel for the river is now used as a tunnel for the underground tram. And the main building of this era is this one, the stock exchange. And the stock exchange is actually very interesting because one of the artists who worked on the decoration was Auguste Rodin, the famous French artist who created the thinker. And Rodin used to live for many years in Brussels, actually, when he was at the beginning of his career. And he said it was the best years of his life living in Brussels. So he did quite a bit of sculpture on the stock exchange. Thank you, Sana. Hope you like it. Thank you, Nelly. And of course, if you have any question, don't hesitate. Please feel free to ask if you see something that seems interesting to you, that you would like to have more comment about. Go. Oui, je vous confirme, Véro et Eddy, oui, c'est bien Rodin. Rodin était bien là et il a fait pas mal de sculptures pour la bourse. Et il habitait à Excel, en fait, en le temps où il était à Bruxelles. And now we are actually going to where Brussels was born. It's so you have to let your imagination flow a little bit. Brussels was born on an island. We have mentions of Brussels around the 10th century, but we know that it has been settled before, but as a sort of little town, it's the 10th century. And over here, this is the island where the city was born, l'île Saint-Géry. The river would flow around before going like this. There would be a bridge here, and a castle. Actually, there was a castle that was built over here, and instead now in the 19th century it was an empty square, and they built this covered market. It's not a covered market anymore. It's become a bar and cultural center. But the funny thing about it is that there used to be a fountain in the middle of the square. So they didn't want to, of course, dismantle the fountain because in a market you need water. So what they decided is that they built the market around the fountain. Oui, Katou, vraiment super chance parce qu'en plus il faisait pas spécialement beau ce matin, il faisait assez nuageux, mais là ça s'est bien dégagé. Donc on va voir. Maybe I can get a quick look because it's partially open. So I don't know if you can see a little bit. Oui. D'accord, merci madame. Oui, merci. So unfortunately we don't have much time for it. All right. So here another mural of the comic strip path. This one is not well known from non-Belgian readers. It's Nero. Very nice. But let's carry on. Slowly we are leaving the we are going to leave the historical district of Brussels to visit a more industrial part of the city, because of course there was a river running through it, and of course with a river you have an harbor, and the harbor of Brussels was actually pretty large and would go right into the heart of the city. Hello Vittoria, sono contenta, sono contenta che ti gode la visita, grazie. Thank you, Sally. Hope you enjoy the rest. It's still, we still have quite a few lovely things to see. So, the river flows here, more or less. And where you have the big building there, that was the end of the harbor. It was the fisherman's wharf that was there. Of course, now it's completely covered, but that's where the harbor would end. And we will take this very beautiful street. Rue des Chartreux is a very old street, although most of the houses date from the late 19th, early 20th century. Oui, René, c'est étonnant, mais encore pas trop de monde, hein. Il est midi en plus, donc les gens mangent. And this place is a cafe called the Greenwich. And Magritte, the famous surrealist painter, used to come here and play chess. And actually, you could still play chess up until recently, but it has been turned into sort of a restaurant, so you don't get to play chess so much anymore at the Greenwich. But it's a beautiful building, and it's nice to know that he was doing that here. So this street actually leads us out of Brussels. At the medieval time, we would encounter the first wall of defense of the city in this street. And see over here, you have a new comic book strip art. This one is pretty famous as well. It's the Angel of Isler. Isler is a cult comic book writer. You know, if you are into what's called the French-Belgian school of comic strip. You know about Hitler and his sombre saga. Those are amazing books. And actually the wall, the first wall, because Brussels had two walls, the first one that was built in the 13th century, and then 3 centuries later they had to build a second one because the city grew so big. In this place, number 42, you have a remain of the city wall. That's just right here. This is a remain of the city wall of Brussels, the first city wall. So for this first city walls, you have a little bit of pieces left here and there in the city. The second city wall, there is nothing left, because the second city wall, as many European towns, when it was torn down, it was transformed into boulevards. And we have a peeing boy, we have a peeing girl as well, which you haven't seen, but we also have a peeing dog. This is Zinneke Piss. Thank you, Marianne. Thank you. So Zinneke Piss is Zinneke in Brussels slang. It means a mutt, a dog of no origin. And because Brussels people are so mixed, we are also called Zinnekes, which mean essentially bastards, because we have no definite origins. And yes, it's a very funny statue. It's not very old, it's a modern one. And we have some beautiful street art here, and the face of Jacques Brel. We have the face of Jacques Brel everywhere. And the very famous Space Invader. Let's carry on forward. Here we have the remain of an older house, typically, Flemish architecture. And basically, if it was the medieval time, we would be right now in the countryside. Actually, in the garden of the religious order of the Chartreux. Thinking that now it's completely built, it's quite impressive. Now this beautiful building that's mixing, old and new, it actually used to be a train station for merchandise. Hello Tarek. So they did a very good job, mixing the old with the new. I think usually it's not really well done, but that's not too bad. Actually, it's only the facade that remains. Everything inside has been torn down, but they kept the facade. And now we are entering toward the more Ah oui, c'est Roubaix, en effet, Charlotte. Tu as raison. The name of the street artist with the face of Jacques Brel is Roubaix. Thank you for mentioning. So, in the 19th century, beginning of the industrialization, and of course, Brussels becomes also an industrial town, and it starts growing factories inside the city. For instance, we have this beautiful building, which is in fact a workshop and apartments. It's a beautiful example of mixed use. As you can see, we have the architect Ames, who is actually quite famous. He did a lot of buildings in Brussels. A lot of famous buildings, and it dates from 1909. It's It's actually not bad at all. It's supposed to say that the boss would live here, where there are the largest windows, and around you would find workshops. As you can see over there on this side, it's completely industrial, you know, with the red brick, typical from the industrial architecture. But now it's been all converted into apartments. And so this part of the city, you know, it used to be the countryside, and it develops into factories, workshops, etc. But you still have, despite all the factories, you still have some very nice houses, such as this one over there, which is quite a beautiful house. It's an Art Nouveau house, very geometrical, but that's because, you know, there were several tendencies in Art Nouveau. You had floral Art Nouveau, geometric Art Nouveau. This one is a geometric Art Nouveau. And Brussels is a city of contrast. So you have like these old houses, and then you have this. It's actually a really big social housing project, which is destined to be torn down. Now with the coronavirus, not sure what's exactly going to happen, but they're supposed to be vacated and torn down to build new social housing, you know, smaller units. So, well, the factories, they're not producing anymore, but you would find, for instance, the factory we saw, it was making glass. There was also a lot of breweries. We'll come across a couple of them, and also you'll find, you know, some leather goods, and we'll see them just in just a minute or two. Of course, again, now you have another contrast. This building is like brand new. It's Brussels is a real mix of a little bit of everything. There is no consistency in the way the city has been built. It's one of the characteristics of Brussels, and it's called, actually, it's even got a name in architecture. It's called Brusselization, which means that it's a tendency to destroy you know, old heritage to make place for the new without any regards to the actual architectural and tissue of a neighborhood. That's how it's called. Avec plaisir, Monique. On y est presque. So, you see the big tower that you see there? It's actually a chimney from an old brewery. It's called la Brasserie de l'Étoile. Brussels used to have hundreds of breweries, and unfortunately, year by year, they closed down until there remained just one. Little ironic for the country of beer, but now with the craft beer movements, we have about, I think, 12 breweries now, hopefully, so that's not bad considering. And now this brewery, it's become the workshop for the Kai Theater. It's a Flemish theater that's especially devoted to performing arts. Most of it dance, but also some theater play. But it's a very reputed theater, very avant-garde. And over here, this beautiful building, Maybe the fashionistas amongst you know the brand. It used to be the workshop of Etes-vous. Etes-vous is a brand of luxury leather goods. They make bags, all kind of stuff, and that used to be, part of their workshop with this house as well. You can see there is still a pulley here, and just next to it, those are actually workers' housing. In the beginning of the 20th century, seeing that the population of Brussels increased a lot, they needed houses to have all these workers, so they decided to build houses like this. Those are examples of this early social housing, basically. And this street, actually the street we're on, it's called Our Lady of Sleep, because before, in the Middle Age, there would be a path in the countryside with the chapel dedicated to the Virgin Mary, and this particular image was said to cure people who had insomnia, so that's why it's called Our Lady of Sleep. And we have reached what is the end of Brussels. As you can see, Brussels city in itself is very small. Instead of this large boulevard, you would have the second city wall. And in front of us, we have the canal and the city of Molenbeek. So just need to wait for the green light. And see what's in front of us. This large complex is actually an old brewery. It's the Bellevue brewery, and it's the largest industrial complex in Molenbeek. It's very, very big, and it was left abandoned for years. But right now, hopefully it's got a new life. The first one to take place inside this building was the Mélangera. It's a hotel and a hostel. It's a combined thing. You have the Mima, a very important museum of contemporary art, and you have also some offices and a restaurant over there. So it's a very, very big project. So along the canal over there, it's if you go toward here, you go toward Antwerp. If you go this way, you go towards Charleroi. It's a very important canal for the history of Brussels, because it would link Antwerp, which is still the second largest harbor in Europe, to Charleroi, where coal and steel was produced. So this canal was part of making Belgium very rich up until the 60s, with the end of the coal mine. And Molenbeek, before, it used to be all countryside. They had, at the 19th century, maybe 5,000 inhabitants. And then, when they built the canal from Brussels to Charleroi, because the canal from Brussels to Antwerp existed already, first thing they thought about was installing factories of everything. You had a lot of tobacco factories, you had breweries, a lot of them. And the population of Molenbeek grew quite a lot. No more countryside for Molenbeek. A lot of factories and small streets and small houses for workers. And ever since, Molenbeek has been like a very popular lower middle class neighborhood. Let me check what time it is. Yes, we still have a bit of time. And as you can see, along the canal, we have some nice street art. Those are portraits of inhabitants of Molenbeek who've been photocopied and then painted. So it's actually a nice touch. And I don't know if you have seen, we have windmills over there all along the canal. Well, that's because Molenbeek in Dutch it means the river of mills, because there used to be a lot of mills over here, and so they decided to put on some colorful windmills along the canal. It brings a nice touch to it. It's a neighborhood that really needs some developing. Brussels has turned its back to the canal for many years. And there you have one of our old trams. They're the only ones who can still run up the hills of Brussels, because it's called the Low Country, but Brussels is not flat at all. We have a lot of hills, and only those kind of trams can climb the hills. So that's why we keep them. Yeah, so I was saying the canal, Brussels turned its back to the canal, but now we are starting to see some development, and hopefully, it will become the place to be. We have a nice street art. I check if you can see it better. Not sure. This street art looks rather violent. It's made by Bonhomme. Bonhomme is our very own Banksy. He was anonymous up until he was caught by the police. But although he didn't claim it was him, we are pretty sure this is him, because it completely looks like his style. No, I thought that they used several, that there were a team of people doing it, but in fact, a couple of months ago, there was a writer released a book inspired by this street art, and there were pictures released. Actually, the artist probably called the photographer friend, and he took pictures of the painting being made. It took him I think 2 or 3 hours only, and he was alone. There was nobody with him, and actually that's quite impressive. And yes, it looks rather violent, but it's the reproduction of a painting by Caravaggio, the sacrifice of Isaac by Abraham, and you can see the end over there, the end of the angel stopping Abraham from cutting his son's throat. So that's a little gruesome, but Bonhomme is known to have some very controversial street art. We will cross the canal quickly so we can have a little bit of a look at Molenbeek. There we are. Those installations you see, those are installations from the old harbor. They're lifts for merchandise. So they've been left as a souvenir. It's always a busy crossing. And we will take the street that's just right here. You will see, if you love street art, stick around. You will be delighted. Oui, Mitchka, je t'avoue que là, j'ai fort envie d'une bière. J'ai un peu soif. Yes, it is a little bit similar to the Naviglio, Letizia. But unfortunately, we don't have all the nice bars and restaurants. Unfortunately. But maybe it will come. We are here in the Rue du Cheval Noir, which means the Black Horse Street, where you have a lot of interesting things. First of all, street art, especially this one, Crayon Crayon. It's a pretty famous street art artist. Actually, it's probably more of a collective of people, because we have noticed some difference of styles in the crayon, but basically they are pencils. This street artist paints pencils. At the beginning, they were just, pencils of different colors doing nothing. But then, with the years, they started doing things. For instance, walking, bearing presents, and this one I particularly like because it's a pencil sculpting a pencil, which I think it's pretty funny. And here you have an old factory that needs to be renovated. I'm pretty sure Molenbeek has a lot of factories, so there's a lot of space to use, but unfortunately the city is poor, so it's a little bit difficult. But they managed to turn around this part of the industrial Molenbeek into an artistic place with lots of street art, as you can see. This one, you have this huge mural. I love the door over here. And this complex is actually pretty new. The old building, it's an old brewery. As you can see, it's got the typical architecture of the industrial time, but some of it have been converted into very nice apartments. But the main goal of it is to be an artist's residence. So if you're an artist and you want to come to Brussels and you need some time to focus on your art, maybe it's a good thing to come here. It's not the only one, actually, in Molenbeek. It's not the only one. You have another artist residence that is just right around the corner. Of course, those industrial spaces are great for studios and to have artists focus on what they do. Also some nice street art. This one by Elle. I can recognize it. And here we are. This wall, this house is like it's an artist residence, and basically the guys, they said to street artists, go ahead, use whatever you want. And they've used whatever they wanted. You have stencils, you have graphs, you have tags, you have some sort of mixed media. You even have yam bombing. So it's everywhere. It's everywhere. So this is also a good place. Unfortunately now, it's a cultural center as well. They organize events, but of course with the lockdown, it's closed. And with this last bit, it's time for me to say goodbye. I hope you enjoy this visit. If you have some questions, don't hesitate to send it to Floqueo. It's been my pleasure, and and my honor to have you around for this virtual visit, and I hope that you will be able to come to Brussels soon, and hit me up if you do. I will be delighted to share a beer and fries with you. See you soon, and thank you Floqueo for the opportunity. Donc en français maintenant, c'était une vraie joie pour moi de vous emmener avec moi dans les rues de Bruxelles. J'ai adoré ce moment en votre compagnie, et j'espère que ça vous a donné une idée de ma belle ville et de toutes les choses qu'il y a à voir. Mais surtout, j'espère que vous aurez l'occasion de venir très vite, une fois que les choses seront revenues à la normale. Et en attendant, si vous avez des questions, envoyez-les à Floqueo qui les relaiera pour moi. Merci à eux pour l'opportunité, et je vous embrasse. À très bientôt. Au revoir. Goodbye. Tot ziens. Et merci à vous.